everyone. My name is Kaylee, and I am the Marketing and Events Coordinator here at Women and Children First. We are one of just a few feminist bookstores remaining in the country, and we thank you for spending some of your evening with us. We begin our events with a land acknowledgement. The land on which the bookstore stands is the unceded homelands of the Council of the Three Fires, the Ojibwe, Ottawa, and Potawatomi nations. Many other tribes, such as the Miami, Ho-Chunk, Menominee, Sac, and Fox, have also called this area home. There are over 75,000 Indigenous people living in Illinois, and we at the bookstore strive to recognize and honor Native literature and communities. We encourage you to learn more about land acknowledgements and the rightful owners of the land where you live and work. We also urge everyone to ground the words in the work and find out what Native-led organizations are doing in your community and how you can support that work. Here at the bookstore, we uplift the important projects being done at the American Indian Center of Chicago. We are so excited tonight to host Stephanie Land to celebrate the release of Class, a memoir of motherhood, hunger, and higher education. This event is hosted in partnership with the National Domestic Workers Alliance, which is one of the country's leading progressive social movement organizations. The NDWA works to win respect, recognition, and labor rights and protections for the nearly 2.5 million nannies, house cleaners, and home care workers who do the essential work of caring for our loved ones and our homes. Tonight, Stephanie will be joined in conversation by the president of the National Domestic Workers Alliance, Ai-jen Poo. A few housekeeping notes before we move on to introductions and our honored guests. The link to purchase the book is in the chat, which will take you to the Women and Children First website. If you are local in Chicago, you can pick up, or we ship nationally. And we do have signed book plates, so you'll get a fun signed book plate in your book. There will be a conversation and then time for the audience Q&A. If you would like to ask a question, please put your question in the Q&A box at the bottom of the screen. It just helps us keep track of things. The event will run about an hour. And now on to our guests. Ai-jen Poo is a next-generation labor leader, award-winning organizer, author, and a leading voice in the women's movement. She is the president of the National Domestic Workers Alliance, director of Caring Across Generations, co-founder of Supermajority, and trustee of the Ford Foundation. Ai-jen is a nationally recognized expert on elder and family care, the future of work, gender equality, immigration, narrative change, and grassroots organizing. She is also the celebrated author of the book, The Age of Dignity, Preparing for the Elder Boom and a Changing America. Stephanie Land is the author of the New York Times bestseller, Made, Hard Work, Low Pay, and a Mother's Will to Survive, called A Testimony Worth Listening to by the New York Times, and inspiration to the Netflix series, Made. Her writing focus is on social and economic justice and parenting under the poverty line. She is a frequent speaker at colleges and national advocacy organizations. We are so excited to celebrate Class. Class paints an intimate and heartbreaking portrait of motherhood as it converges and often conflicts with personal desire and professional ambition. It asks questions like, who has the right to create art? Who has the right to go to college? And what kind of work is valued in our culture? In clear, candid, and moving prose, Class grapples with these questions, offers a searing indictment of America's educational system, and is an inspiring testimony of a mother's triumph against all odds. Welcome, Ai-jen and Stephanie.
Thank you, Kaylee. I'm so excited to be here and so excited to get to celebrate you, Stephanie, and this incredible book that you've written. Huge, huge congratulations to you on this masterpiece. Y'all have to get this book. If you have not gotten this book yet, you just really need to hurry up and do it. I am a person who is a very slow reader, and I read 4 books at a time, and it takes me forever. When I picked this book up, I could not stop reading it because it is stunning, it is brave, it is so beautifully written. Stephanie, congratulations.
Wow, thank you. It's so good to see you, Ai-jen, and thank you for doing this event with me. It's always a treat to be able to talk to you.
Likewise. And yeah, so we will talk a bit about the book today and also just how are you doing? How are you? How is Amelia? How is Coraline? How's everybody doing?
We're doing pretty good. We just had dinner. My husband, my husband made chili and cornbread, and so I got to hear all
Ooh.
about their school day and what they have going on, and so it's starting to feel like we're kind of getting back to normal. Like I've kind of been gone for the last several months and was working on a book full time before that, so it's nice to have some downtime with the family.
Yes, yes. Well, a lot of the book is about how to navigate motherhood and life, especially as a student, as an aspiring writer, as somebody who has dreams and hopes and aspirations. And I'm just curious how life is now that you have these two best-selling books, and you've been on book tour, and you are an established world-class author. How is all of it coming together for you now?
Well, I think there's always a lot of pressure, um, because, I'm still essentially a freelancer. Like, so it's kind of up to me to come up with what's next. So anything that is on deck is very much celebrated. So I'm happy to see that my calendar for public speaking is filling up for next year. And I'm talking about the next project that I'm going to be working on, and how that's going to fall into place, or what that is going to look like, I guess. And I don't know. I'm looking forward to teaching again. I usually teach the business of writing, so I'm kind of excited to have opportunities to do that again. And I don't know. I feel like I have about 4 or 5 things going on at all times. That hasn't changed.
That's good. It's a very generative space for you, I think, which is really great. Although I would love for you to have a little bit more security than
I
you.
know, I know. Those regular paychecks, man, they're a good
It's a
thing.
thing. It's a thing, yeah. Um, Well, it's just worth saying that as a former domestic worker, and as somebody who works with and for domestic workers every day, we're just so proud of you. I mean, you have done so much, and you've really brought the attention of millions of people onto the experiences of working class women, domestic workers, and what it's like to try to raise children on incomes that are impossible to make ends meet with. And so, first with Maid, I think you brought the attention of millions of people who would otherwise not have any idea about what it's like to try to make the numbers work at the end of the week. Um, to really immersing them in a story that they really cared about. And so I'm just curious about, for this second book, what were you hoping it would do as an extension in terms of building off of what Maid did?
Well, I thought Maid kind of showed a lot of the barriers that I had, just in order to get to work. And the struggle between childcare and being able to feed myself, and clothing, and my car breaking down, and housing security, and all of that. And all of that is still going on in the second book, but
Yeah.
I also have this kind of monumental task of getting to an unpaid space that I'm actually like paying a lot of money to be in, and to achieve a degree in higher education, which at one point in the book, I am I'm kicked off of food stamps because I could not meet the work requirements. I was only working an average of 15 hours a week instead of 20. And so the government told me that I wasn't working enough in order to eat, which when I sat down to write the book, I realized how much that was still affecting me now. Just, I think as a citizen and as a person, as a human being, you know, to be told that you don't deserve to eat because you can't work enough is that it affects you. And I'm still, I think, trying to make sense of how that equation actually exists.
Yeah, I thought that that was such a powerful part of the book, and so well told. I just can't help but think if we could see the world through the eyes of working poor women, we would just see such a clearer picture of all that we have to change, but also all of the possibility that exists. And I think your book really shows both. Um, and I remember that moment, and I remember thinking that, the cruelty of the food stamps requirements, and the reality that we have a lot of women who are actually working full time who are food insecure because there's so many jobs that don't pay you enough. So it's kind of like trapped between a rock and a hard place of you work too much, you work not enough, and no matter what, you're kind of stuck in this situation of having impossible choices and food insecure. A recent survey we did of domestic workers showed that 8 in 10 domestic workers still experience food insecurity, even as they're working. So it just underscores how important it is to tell this story and to keep organizing. And you've been such a strong advocate for policy change, for raising awareness about public assistance and also childcare and domestic work. And I was thinking a lot in this book, in both books, about the work that we're doing to try to advocate for a stronger care infrastructure in this country, especially when it comes to childcare or aging and disability care. And I just wondered if you could say a little bit about how your needs for childcare kind of evolved and changed once you entered into school. And I know it was still a challenge, but what a difference it would have made if you as a student had access to affordable or free childcare.
I mean, as you were talking, like I was thinking, being kicked off of food stamps was kind of okay compared to the risk of being kicked off of childcare grants, because I did face that risk many times, when they do recertifications and you hand in some wrong paperwork, or they decide to audit you for some reason. And so it's really scary because that is how you are able to do everything else. And I think, as working moms in general, that's kind of a hard thing to be, because then, you're trying to be independent, but you're supposed to be a full-time mom or something. And so, but as a single mom, I mean, I had to be both parents, and then I absolutely needed childcare in order to eat and to raise my child and be able to buy school supplies and everything. And the childcare system, the childcare resources, the office there, it was just so hard. I mean, it was I don't know, the one thing that they did do at the college that I went to was they did count the hours that I was physically sitting in class as, toward how many hours I needed. And then that was really new. Like I'd never had that before. And I think it's because their office was in the school itself, and so they had access to my records, which is a whole other thing too. 'Cause like it's weird that like I'm like when I could afford daycare, I didn't have to give them my work schedules and my financial outlook and you know my schedule and how much downtime I had during the day. Like I could just buy, purchase daycare, like and take my kid to daycare and there would be no question. But since I was applying for this grant, I had to answer dozens of questions about my personal life and my schedule, and it's really overbearing, it's invasive, and at the time it was normal to have to say all of that all the time to complete strangers and let them know what my whereabouts were at any moment of the day. And now that I've had some space from it, it's so weird that that process exists, that people applying for a very minimal amount of assistance for food have to reveal whether or not they have a burial plot, or if they have some hidden assets somewhere. I always felt like they were going to find something that I didn't even know about. And I would lose all of these assistance programs that I really relied on. But childcare, I mean, I had evening classes. I had classes that went past 5 p.m. And that all required a babysitter of some type. It was like every day I was texting somebody. I was, making sure and double checking. It was a lot of mental energy and effort just to make sure that my child was somewhere safe and being taken care of. And there were a lot of people that helped me with that. Some of the critics of the book say like that there was like this revolving door of babysitters, and I'm like, well, yeah, like whatever happened to that term, it takes a village, like, and that was my village of people, and I was really lucky to have them, because without it, there's no way I would have been able to get a degree. I mean, without being able to sometimes kind of often bring my daughter to class with me, and to be able to leave her with a neighbor so that I could go to my evening class or work. I mean, childcare was always, and that doesn't even include homework, and the time that I spent studying. So childcare was the most needed and my biggest task.
Mm-hmm. Yep, absolutely. It is so powerful the way that you are able to capture how dehumanizing these systems are, or in this case, a lack of a system. It is, if you're not in this position, it is very hard to understand the texture of just how the kind of small and large indignities of having to prove that you deserve a tiny amount of assistance, and it just shouldn't be. It isn't this way in other countries. I mean, I think there's a social scientist named Jessica Calarco who says other countries have a safety net. The U.S. has women, and it's about forcing women to make impossible choices. And I'm sorry, but whoever is criticizing your book around a revolving door of babysitters, I need to have some words with them, because first of all, nobody does it alone. And second of all, if we had any semblance of a caregiving infrastructure in this country where especially working class and working poor women could get the kind of assistance they need when they need it, we would never have to make impossible choices like the ones we have to make. And it is a good thing to have many adults involved in caring for children. And care is going to be an all hands on deck situation in the future, no matter what, because of how much I mean, literally 10,000 babies are born every day. 10,000 people turn 65. Care is really core to how we are going to move forward or not as a country. And so I was really glad to see how powerfully you were able to capture the need for childcare in your book. I'm curious if there are themes like that of takeaways as you were writing where you were thinking like you kind of excavated parts of your story of that year and that time that feel like they were real teachers, that they really shaped you, that you want to kind of highlight for us.
I think, one that kind of is a branch on the food insecurity is that I wanted to show that there's a lot of parallels between my experience as a low-income college student and my daughter's experience in the public school system as a kindergartner with a mother who is low income. And part of that was knowing that we were food insecure, knowing that, she wore clothes a lot longer than she probably should have. And that I couldn't volunteer in the class. It was really hard for me even to be able to make it to parent teacher conferences. We were always late. There's a lot of things. And I was really worried. I kind of lived in fear of someone becoming concerned, like with a capital C and calling me out for possibly being neglectful in some way. And that really prevented me from being honest about what was happening and what we were experiencing, how much help we actually really did need. And I think, if there wasn't this kind of air of mistrust and not really giving me any compassion or the benefit of the doubt, even sometimes, I would have been able to access a lot more in resources, because I would have said like, hey, there's no food. Like, do you know of anything? Is there an extra thing in town? Is there some other resource that I don't know about? Because a lot of being poor is kind of tapping into this almost a whisper network of like who has grants and where, and who has free backpacks for school, like who has, and it's always different. There's never I don't know. I often started to rely on the 211 for help, that I think is pretty universal in most states. Like if you pick up a phone and dial 211, then there's usually a person on the other line who knows about a resource that you're looking for. And I wish that I had started using that sooner. I learned about it. And so I think, as far as themes in the book, it was really just the barriers that we both faced, and and it's not just about higher education. It starts in kindergarten. The things that she missed out on because I was working essentially in her experience as like a kindergartner in the classroom, and then like how I missed out on a lot of college life just because I didn't have a lot of time to socialize. Socializing was expensive. So
That's right. Yeah. You do write about people who you met along the way who really did help to lift you up. There were friends, professors, others, and then there were also people who really were obstacles and tried to kind of pull you back. And I'm just wondering if you could talk a little bit about that, and just how important the role of some of these people are that root for you along the way.
I think I remember every single conversation I have ever had with a teacher who told me I was a good writer. And I actually started talking about one of them at my very first book event in New York City. And she was in the audience and I didn't know it. Like, I started talking about a professor of mine who sat me down in my early 20s after I had taken this journalism class, just because another class had canceled and I kind of fell into this spot. And at the end of the semester, she sat me down and she said, you're a really good writer. You're really good at this. And then I saw her after the event, and it was so amazing. But
Amazing.
it's like these moments that you have of sincerity and connection. And when I think it's normal for any situation, when you really feel like you're connected with someone and they tell you something great. I mean, you remember stuff like that. But when you're doing this thing that feels like it's such a big risk and such an indulgence, and society in general is telling you that you should not even try. For me, and the moments where professors told me, or even celebrated a very small, win that I had with getting something published. I mean, that was huge for me, because if they thought that I was doing good, then I must be on the right track or something. So
I love that. Yeah. One of the things that I always reflect on is how much privilege buys you room for error. And class privilege, especially class privilege, racial, gender privilege, all these forms of privilege are about the room to fail, the room to be human, honestly.
yeah.
And what a teacher can do, what a community can do, even just seeing yourself in someone else's story can do to help you give yourself some grace, is so important. And I know so many domestic workers, some nannies, cleaners, home care workers who have huge dreams and are constantly told that they are not allowed to have those dreams. And here you are, living the dream. Would love to hear what you have. And of course, it's not all roses, I know that, but just any wisdom you have for working class women out there who have dreams they're not supposed to have and make mistakes and are human and don't have much room for error.
I think, I want to say that if, we all started just kind of really going for it and not caring what other people thought, but I feel like it has to be like a massive movement. Like it would have to be normalized. Like it would have to be normal for someone to say, no, I want to do this. And someone to say like, oh, that's a really great idea. I think you should really try. And just like, I always think about that, like just for society in general, like if someone comes up with some like, I don't know, I want to raise hedgehogs, like then that's your thing and that's great and I support you, like instead of telling them like, no, I really think you should get a 9-to-5 job as a secretary, because that's what people told me all the time. And it was just,
God, you didn't do that.
I would have had a mean blog, I'm sure. But it's so sad to me that I am an anomaly, and that I am someone who people ask that question, like I want so many other people who have stories that are way more interesting than mine, to have their stories out there, and people who immigrated here and were able to carve a life themselves. And I it's always been my hope, because I recognize a lot of privilege in my story, and just how it had the success that it did, because of that. And so I have always hoped that it would open doors for other stories to come out. And that's one thing I love about you and your organization is how you do have you have people placing op-eds, and people getting their voices out there in a narrative way, that is just, it's so vital. I think, that's how you create empathy, and that's how you are able to grow some compassion for your next door neighbor or the person who's working in your house.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And your book actually did really open doors, between your book and the Netflix series. We were able to really, there was so many people who watched that series. Everybody was obsessed with it. It was probably like one of the most popular limited series of all time, I think.
Yeah, it still has kind of a cult following on TikTok.
It's incredible. And we were able to partner with the showrunner and the team there at Made to take this moment where people had a little bit more space in their imaginations for the experiences of working class, working poor, domestic workers, moms, and really insert other women's stories in there. And we continue to do that. And you did open that door. So mission accomplished, check. And we're gonna keep going. And I do think that what we are doing collectively at the National Domestic Workers Alliance and in all movement organizations is really about our collective dream for the ability for each of us to realize our dreams individually, and the interdependence between our collective and our individual dreams, and the dream of dignity for this work.
Yeah, I
First,
talk a lot about dignity and just how dignity should not be assigned to work. Like, jobs should not be the things that hold dignity. It should be humans. And if we look at it that way, then the amount of dignity would be equal. But instead, it's assigned to the jobs that we do, and that is just, it's tragic to me, because then it's back to this argument of what has more skill, than another job, and what has more dignity. And it's just, I usually tell people, when I'm doing a keynote or just talking to an audience, is we would not be sitting here without people cleaning up after us. And it would not be possible for us to, go to the airport and leave on a plane if there weren't people who were cleaning up. And I, the people who come in and clean up after us are not only like have these jobs that are basically to make our lives easier, but without them, the pilot wouldn't be able to fly the plane, And so I like, if I have one thing that I want to get across, it's just like, think about how many people have already cleaned up after you today. And it, like, especially when I'm on book tour, like it was both hands. If you're thinking about the bussers and the grocery store clerks and, the people who clean the bathrooms in the airports, it's a lot. And without that work, any other job would not be possible.
That's exactly right. Yeah, and I think about how it took a pandemic for care workers to be called essential workers, and the median income of a home care worker is still $23,000 a year. I mean, it's just, what are we doing?
Yeah.
What are we doing?
It was like a couple of months. It was a couple of months that they were essential, but that was also kind of sad to me in that moment. Like, at first I'm just like, yeah, essential workers, but then I'm like, but are we really just like trying to make them feel better about being forced to go to their job in the middle of a pandemic because they can't afford to do anything else? And so it was some mixed feelings for me there. But
Yeah, but the good news is that care workers are organizing all over the country and have been winning unions and pay increases and training programs. And so I think, and domestic workers too, the people who clean and maintain our households and make sure that our homes are sane, livable places, are actually demanding health and safety protections in California, demanding a Bill of Rights, a federal Bill of Rights, which you came and helped us lobby for. We are still pushing. We have not given up, and we intend to continue to push until we win. And that's the thing, is the kind of determination that comes with working in a job that you know is essential and that you know has so much value, and you're trying to get the rest of society to catch up, is something that it's actually just really powerful to be a part of a community that has that kind of determination and tenacity. And you've
yeah,
experienced it, right? You came with us.
I did. You are inspirational. I mean, just the amount of passion and really empowerment that there is in when you get a group of people together. And so it was really encouraging, I think, to see how much work that you guys are doing and getting as many people as possible with lived experience on the stage to tell their stories is really powerful, I think.
One thing I also wanted to chat about briefly before we start the Q&A, because I think a lot of people have questions, is it was also just so, it was almost like this, as you were having a release when you would get to go climbing or go to a party in the book, I would feel this release too. And I'm just so glad that you were able to just actually also just be a college student at times and be able to capture that aspect of the experience in the book. And also it was clear it was like challenging. You had to jump through 10 hoops in order to do something very normal that another college student would take for granted. And I just wonder if you could talk a little bit about that, of like the struggle to be a normal college student.
Well, I mean, first I was like 15 years older than everybody, so
Right.
I felt a little weird, I felt like, that meme of Steve Buscemi like showing up at a party like with the hat sideways and everything. Like I kind of felt that way. But I mean, there were a lot of things within the graduate school, that I missed out on, like author readings and things like that, I couldn't attend. And that was where a lot of networking happened, and that I didn't even really know about. Like, I just thought it would be a cool thing to go to, but that's where the letters of reference happen. And so I don't know, the one thing that I heard about from people with the series that I really enjoyed hearing was that it stressed them out. And it's just like, oh, it's so stressful for me. I just, like, she starts counting down and she's doing all this math and it's just, I can't watch. It's too stressful. And I was like, you need to get back on your couch and you need to live that with her, because that constant stress and the constant worry is it affects you cognitively.
Yeah.
And so with the book, I was really trying to recreate that feeling of just like, we gotta go do this. It's always like 10 things that we have to do before she goes to bed at night, and then I have my list of things that I need to do before I can sleep. And just to have those moments of like even I called them 15-minute vacations, where I would show up early to pick her up and get like 15 minutes of silence. I mean, now my life is so different now, and to be able to go back and write that, I got so angry, and I, you know, it was almost like I had this mama bear feeling over my own former self, because it was so heartbreaking to write some of those scenes, because I remember so vividly how it felt to be sitting in class having a pretty mild panic attack, over something that just happened with your child, and
Yeah.
worry about that. And then you're scribbling a budget and you're hungry and all of these things, while the person next to you is like low-key complaining that this is the only school that their parents would pay for. And you're just like, there's such a difference there. And it was really hard to not have animosity toward my classmates,
Yeah.
that I think I missed out on a lot of school just because of all of that, because I felt like I was living such a different life. And so I worked, I worked at my schoolwork. I always had really good grades, but like with writing workshops, I would hand in like twice as much as they asked for. And for me, it was just like, I'm going to get my money's worth here. And so it was like, I showed up in school demanding an education. And but school, college isn't just about that. It's about the relationships that you build with other people. And so I didn't even know about that until I was learning about the college experience as a freelance writer. So.
Yeah. No, I remember that scene where you were having the anxiety attack. I actually didn't want to eat peanut butter for a really long time after reading your book. Yeah, I mean, that immersive stress is the point. Like, I believe that if more decision makers in our country were forced to be immersed in that reality more often, we would have a very different country. We would have
Yeah.
a very different reality. I mean, that is exactly the point. And you've done such a beautiful job telling the story that I think it's a bit irresistible. So I'm hopeful that we'll get a whole bunch of them immersed in the story and proximate to the stress and the pain and the absolute kind of, yeah, I'm glad you mentioned the cognitive impacts of poverty, because that stress of having to make decisions in a context of scarcity is like, yeah, has huge consequences. So
Yeah.
I'm so glad that you went there, and you're such a great writer and storyteller that I think it really does take people where they need to go.
I hope so. I think a lot of the criticism that I get from I don't know, the average reader who is maybe not as open-minded as the other one, they like to point to bad decisions and bad decision making, and but they're also in a world where there's always a good option. And so to me, like my better option would be a good decision on my part, but to them, everything is a bad decision. So I think that's one thing that people don't really understand is I really didn't have other options. And it was really hard to make decisions when, what you're doing feels so selfish. and so self-centered. And I was getting a bachelor's degree in English. Like, it's not like I was getting, I don't know, a degree in hedgehog raising. Like, or just like something that like was really out there, but like I'm still being criticized just for choosing to get a bachelor's degree. And I think, for a lot of people in this country, that is a pretty normal extension of high school. Like, it's a pretty normal thing that they do. And it's not a luxury. It's not something that they think is selfish. It is just what they do. But for me, it felt every single time that something went wrong, like that was the first thing that I thought of, and the first thing that I questioned whether or not I should be doing it, and felt a lot of guilt and shame. And it was just to go to school, and that, I never felt entitled to that. And I don't even know what it would feel like to feel entitled to an education.
Yeah. It's so deep how also deep and almost unconscious some of these narratives are about the narratives that blame people for the position in society that they're in, when it's a clear, it's about hierarchies of power that are deeply entrenched and have entire cultural narratives built around them to reinforce them. And this idea of blaming the victim is, or the survivor, is just so deep in us as a reaction, that I think it is profound, and it's part of the reason why some of these dynamics persist. And one of the reasons why your book is so important, it's like it does force people to really think about what you deserved and what you earned and what you fought for, and what existed to help or to hurt. And so that, yeah, all of that is, I think, gets to the heart of the reaction. It's, in some ways, it's the reaction you want, because you're pushing people to think about why things are the way that they are for so many low-income women.
Yeah. There's a lot of things happening. It's not just like, well, that I didn't go to college straight out of high school, and that's why I'm poor in my late 20s. It's, no, actually, there's a lot more than that. But that always seems to be the one that people are caught up on.
Yeah. Well, now that are we your last stop on the book tour?
Yes. After this, I don't have to talk to anyone for my job for the rest of the year.
You're kidding.
Yeah. This is my final event. So
Congratulations.
thank you.
Tell us a little bit about the arc of the tour. What kinds of events did you do? Who did you meet? Who did you talk to? I saw some of it online, but any highlights you want to give us?
Oh man. Well, I learned some things from the Made book tour, and so this time around, I really tried to put effort into creating space where I could celebrate it with people. And so the day that my book was published, I flew a friend into town. Another one took a train up from DC, and we were all able to go out to dinner together. And I got, the cakes with the book cover on it. And I made us all sweatshirts, and like got everybody gifts. And so it was really great to have my best friend with me. And we stayed up late watching the Righteous Gemstones and eating ice cream. And so those are the moments that kind of stick out for me, is just these moments that I said, no, I can't do that this afternoon. I need to give myself some time. It's a nice day. Like, I need to get out and stop and like really enjoy the fact that I'm traveling all the time. But you know, I got to see so many people. One of my employers from Port Townsend surprised me by coming to New York. And so she's been a good friend of mine for a long time, and people just kept surprising me and showing up. And I got to start the tour with Leslie Jameson as the moderator, which is just like I'm falling all over myself, you know. I got to hang out with Isaac Fitzgerald, and my she's technically my assistant and social media manager, but I just kind of refer to her as my manager. She was able to come with me on the whole book tour and got to see Montana. She had never been to the West Coast. So it was really nice to have that support. I really fought for that support, and I'm glad I did, because talking to people is not something that like comes naturally for me. And so I do have a lot of anxiety and a lot of PTSD going on, and just things that bubble up every once in a while. And so it was nice to kind of have all that information so I could know what to expect this time. And so, I mean, looking back, like I have good memories of it, which is good. Like that's not normal for me. So, it was really great. You know, like I feel like with the book tour for Made, it was just kind of like I was just thrown into this room of a bunch of people talking, and I suddenly had to talk to all of them too. But this time, you know, I've been a public speaker for 5 years, and it's not as terrifying to to sit on stage and have a couple hundred people looking at me. So it was nice. And this book there's so many different layers to it that interviews were kind of interesting because, you know, one journalist would focus on food insecurity and how that created just eating habits for my children. And then another person, you know, just purely wanted to talk about MFA programs. So it was, I mean, it's exhausting, but it was also just really interesting to me to have this book that I kind of experimented with some of the content that I put into it, because I knew that it was going to make people mad. Because like you said, I am out there trying to have the college experience, and that means, you know, going out and having sex and, you know, having a drink and like, so I was kind of prepared for some pearl clutching, you know, in some aspect, but I'm not like an angry person normally, so it was kind of fun to, I don't know, like I think I'm always going to expect the worst, and but it was fun to see that people really appreciated the anger. That part of it was nice. It was nice to be able to talk about that in a good way.
Yeah.
So
Absolutely. Well, I'm so excited that we get to be your last stop on the book tour, and that you get some quiet time with family over the holidays, and also that you were able to kind of be there to watch people interact with the story. That must have been also very special because of all that you put into telling it. So I'm just so excited and happy for you, and it's just it's wonderful. Congratulations.
thank you. I really appreciate it.
Echoing that, congratulations. We have a few moments. Thank you for everyone who put your cues in the Q&A box. The first one we have from Stacy is, what words of wisdom do you have for community college professors and staff who work with students like you every day?
Well, I think, it's helpful for me to internalize some statistics, and the ones that came out recently for undergraduates was 23% are food insecure, 8% are likely homeless, 1 in 10 are parents, 1 in 5 are single parents, and so I think, when you start to think about your classroom being a diverse place with all of these specific needs, and it's not full of 21-year-olds who live in the dorms, like, you can get creative. And the things that I have heard from people since the book came out, the things that I love to hear are professors who are putting like right on their syllabus that children are always welcome in class. Or, I think people who know about resources, I've been really encouraging them to be more forthcoming about that information. I mean, if you just make it normal, like, and so, these are my office hours, explain what those are, like, you can come to talk to me whenever you need. And these are the hours of our food bank. I really encourage you to go check that out. Like, I've heard of colleges who have textbook lending libraries. And I think, the more that you can create your office as a professor as a safe space, it can be monumental to a person's ability to get the education that they need, because they will know that you're a safe place to ask for resources.
Wonderful, wonderful. We don't have a ton of time, so we'll condense a few of them quickly. We did get quite a few craft questions, and someone did ask, it often feels daunting to think about writing a longer piece of work. Can you talk about how you avoid getting overwhelmed and how you built up to the entire memoir?
I might not be the best person to ask that. I procrastinate, like, until my writing process is very mental. I'll think about things, I'll kind of immerse myself in a time period. And that's hard when it's like a really traumatizing and hard and kind of sad time in your life. But I'm a bit of an investigator of my own life. I went back and looked at everything and had a general idea of what I was going to do. And then I just sat down and got it all out. I kind of did the same thing with Made. I think it's just how I was kind of forced to learn how to write, because I didn't have a lot of time to actually sit down and type things out. So I would go through a lot of the mental work beforehand of, planning scenes and things like that, so that when I did actually have time to write, I could write super fast. So class came out in a total of 31 writing days to get the rough draft. And Made, I think, was maybe twice as much as that. So I don't recommend doing that. I've promised my best friend to never do it again. Yeah, it was like, some days were like 500 words, but then others were like 4,000 or 5,000. And a lot of that was just because I had a hard deadline, and it was October 1st, and it was already August, and like, I've got to get this done. So the one thing that I ended up doing was, if I had a speaking gig somewhere, I would buy the hotel room that I was in for a few extra days, and so that I could just kind of wake up and make some coffee and start writing, and then write until I couldn't anymore, and then sleep for a little bit and do it all over again the next day. And so I don't think I would have been able to create that kind of space in a house with 4 other people, or I guess I have a dog that's 150 pounds. Like, he's kind of a person.
Yes, yes, marinating, part of the process. The question I feel like everyone wants to know, any hopes of seeing class portrayed on screen? Any deals in the works you can talk about?
I don't know of anything, so I would hope that they would tell me if there was. So,
So
so
produce.
no exciting information there.
Awesome. Well, thank you all so much for this wonderful conversation. Thank you to all of our attendees. The link to purchase class from Women and Children First is in the chat. A few other things as well. You can follow Stephanie on social at Stepville. You can follow the National Domestic Workers Alliance on social under Domestic Workers or at domesticworkers.org. Don't forget to give the domestic workers in your life a holiday bonus, just as we're all thinking about. But thank you all so much, everyone. Have a great night.
Thank you.
Thank you. Happy holidays.